And we are back for prepping for winter with the Mercy sample chapter. Arya is in Bravos, having wolf dreams about being on the hunt, and she is posing as an actress named Mercy in The Bloody Hand, a play based on Tyrion being shown for the Westerosi envoy Harry Swift. While awaiting the play to begin, audience members that would remind her of her death list are pointed out to Arya, and Arya's gaze is brought to see Raff the Sweetling. Arya then tries to get closer to this potential target. And so let's continue. The handsome guardsman grinned. Don't suppose he'll share her with us afterward. What? Are you mad? You think he notices the likes of us? Bloody bugger don't even get our names right half the time. Maybe it was different with Clegane. Sir wasn't one for mummer shows and fancy whores. When Sir wanted a woman, he took one. But sometimes he'd let us have her. After. I wouldn't mind having a taste of that black pearl. You think she's pink between her legs? So here Raff the Sweetling asks if he thinks Harry Swift will allow them to have sex with the Black Pearl after he does. And of course, the other guard thinks Raff the Sweetling is an idiot for thinking such a thing. Lords don't give expensive sex workers to lowly guards. Raff then goes on to say that the Mountain would gift his men women after he raped them, and again expresses interest in sex with the Black Pearl. Now, all of this exposes how absolutely insane Raff the Sweetling is. Not only does he have no morals or any sense of empathy to speak of, but he has no clue about what is socially acceptable. Here he not only thinks that he might get to have sex with an expensive courtesan, but then speaks quite openly about how he would participate in gang rapes when he was one of the Mountain's men. So it's perhaps a bit ambiguous, but Raff the Sweetling's language may reveal to Arya that the Mountain is dead, or at least cause Arya to question whether he's dead. Here Raff says that the Mountain wasn't for mummer shows, instead of isn't for mummer shows. The Mountain is in the past tense, as if he's dead, though one perhaps could interpret the Mountain being in the past tense because it's a past experience for Raff. We'll have to wait and see if the Mountain is removed from Arya's death list in the future. Mercy wanted to hear more, but there was no time. The Bloody Hand was about to start, and the Snapper would be looking for her to help with costumes. Isambaro might be the king of the mummers, but the Snapper was the one they all feared. Time enough for her pretty guardsmen later. And so here we find out that Arya wants to hear more of what Raff the Sweetling is saying. Now, I can't imagine that Arya is interested in Raff's desire to have sex with the Black Pearl or his stories of gang rape, so it appears that Arya wants more confirmation that this is in fact Raff the Sweetling, or perhaps she noticed Raff's line about the Mountain, a name on her death list, and wants some more information on his status. Now Arya is short on time as the play is about to start, so she hurries back to help with costumes in fear of the wrath of the Snapper, figuring that she has time to deal with Raff the Sweetling later. The Bloody Hand opened in a lich yard. So here we have an intriguing line that can be interpreted many ways. So a lich yard seems to be the preferred Westerosi name for a graveyard, though they do use the term graveyard as well. And the term lich yard literally means corpse yard. And so yes, on one level the play opens in the graveyard as the setting for the first scene. However, we should also remember that in the actual story, Tyrion's time as Hand also begins in a lich yard. After surviving his first battle at the Green Fork, a field of corpses, a lich yard, he is made Hand of the King by his father. But also, the entire story, A Song of Ice and Fire, opens with Brothers of the Night's Watch finding a bunch of corpses. And in a more metaphorical sense, the entire world of Ice and Fire is a bloodbath where nearly everyone is going to get killed, so in that sense, our story opens in a lich yard. And even on top of this, we should remember that the gate is not a stable structure. It's only a matter of time until it collapses, killing everyone inside. So in that sense as well, the play is opening in a lich yard. When the dwarf appeared suddenly from behind a wooden tombstone, the crowd began to hiss and curse. Bobono waddled to the front of the stage and leered at them. "The seven-faced god has cheated me," he began, snarling the words. "My noble sire he made of purest gold, and gold he made my siblings, boy and girl. But I am formed of darker stuff, of bones and blood and clay." And so here the play begins with the crowd rowdily booing Bobono. Now interestingly, this is opening night and the play has just begun, and yet the crowd knows that Bobono is the villain. This speaks to Bobono's typecasting and the repetition of shows at the gate. whether it be the rapist dwarf in The Anguish of the Archon or the grumpkin in The Merchant's Lusty Lady. The crowd knows Bobono is the villain, either because Bobono always plays the villain, or because the dwarf is always the villain, or both. By then, Morrow had appeared behind him, gaunt and terrible in the stranger's long black robes. His face was black as well, his teeth red and shiny with blood, while ivory horns jutted upward from his brow. Bobono could not see him, but the balconies could, and now the pit as well. The gate grew deathly quiet. Morrow moved forward, silently. And so here, Morrow, playing the stranger, emerges. And again, as we spoke of in part 4, the stranger of the Bloody Hand looks more like a demon and nothing like the stranger of Westerosi tradition. And this displays the perverse, inaccurate nature of the play. Now, interestingly, in the play's scene, death creeps forward silently towards Bobono, but Bobono cannot see it. This is striking as Bobono the actor is in fact in great peril that he is unaware of. Later, Raff the Sweetling decides that he's going to murder the dwarf just in case Bobono happens to be Tyrion. Arya actually saves Bobono's life by disposing of Raff, though her primary motivation for murder is certainly vengeance for Alami Greenhands. Now, if the parallel holds between Bobono and Tyrion, we have a couple more ways of viewing the scene. Tyrion 2, The Winds of Winter, opens with Tyrion fearing the coming of the stranger as Barristan's forces advance. So death creeping towards Bobono playing Tyrion could be in reference to that. However, here death is silently creeping towards Bobono, so we should wonder if there is a secret danger threatening Tyrion over in Slaver's Bay. There is Kem, a second son who certainly has a reason to hate Tyrion, and there's the Yunkish armies to the east of Tyrion that everyone seems to have forgotten about, and there's the mysterious Penny, whose backstory simply doesn't add up. Then again, if the parallel between her and Arya holds more strongly, it would be Penny saving Tyrion from death as Arya saves Bobono from death. So did Mercy. The costumes were all hung, and the snapper was busy sewing Dana into her gown for the court scene, so Mercy's absence should not be noted. Quiet as a shadow, she slipped around the back again, up to where the guardsmen stood outside the envoy's box. And so here Arya has finished her work and finds that the snapper is occupied sewing Dana into her gown. And this is another indication that Dana is in fact playing Sansa in the play. So normally clothing has buttons or clasps, or today zippers, to keep the clothing on someone. Sewing someone into clothing is something done in theater when there isn't time to deal with a tear or the replacement of buttons and clasps. This suggests that Dana's gown has been torn open and needs to be fixed, which evokes the incident where Joffrey orders Boris Blount to tear Sansa's gown off in Sansa 3, A Clash of Kings, and when Tyrion enters to threaten Joffrey. No doubt the scene has been altered in The Bloody Hand to somehow make Tyrion look bad and Joffrey look good. Likely it will be Bobono tearing Dana's dress. Interestingly, earlier Dana was lecturing Arya on appropriate behavior for an actress, but here she is doing a nude scene. So we also hear Arya's mantra, quiet as a shadow. Earlier she thought silent as a shadow, a close alternative that she sometimes thinks. So about this, Arya has a number of internal mantras that we occasionally hear throughout her story, with some being more common than others. Quiet as a shadow, calm as still water, fierce as a wolverine, and fear cuts deeper than swords are the more common ones, while swift as a deer, strong as a bear, quick as a snake, the man who fears losing has already lost, aren't heard past the first book. Now, Arya first thinks these mantras in Arya 3, A Game of Thrones, when chasing cats and hiding from Varys and Illyrio among the dragon skulls, and later the words are identified as her lessons from Syrio. But there is some weirdness to them. When they first start reappearing in her head in Arya 4, they are described as a small voice whispering in her ear. Arya is even confused about whether the voice she hears is her own voice or Syrio's speaking to her. And so because of this oddness, there is some question to whether or not Arya's mind is being messed with, or if these messages are just her own mind. Because this is Ice and Fire, it is a possibility that these messages are being sent to her telepathically. Now, what is striking about these mantras is that they're often thought about right before Arya does something odd and reckless. For example, when Arya first meets Jaqen H'ghar, Rorg, and Biter, they are taunting her and commanding her to get them beer. She thinks fear cuts deeper than swords, calm as still water, and fierce as a wolverine. The words ring in her ears, and then she approaches Biter and punches him in the face. Jaqen H'ghar even remarks after the incident that Arya has more courage than sense. And here we have Arya thinking her mantra and sneaking away from her job assigned to her by a very dangerous assassins guild to murder a very dangerous psychopath. Of course, it may just be that when Arya is scared, she uses the mantras to overcome her fear. Still, it should be noted that the mantra's first appearance is curious. Standing in the darkened alcove, still as stone, she had a good look at his face. She studied it carefully, to be sure. Am I too young for him, she wondered. Too plain. Too skinny. She hoped he wasn't the sort of man who liked big breasts on a girl. Bobono had been right about her chest. It would be best if I could take him back to my place, have him all to myself. But will he come with me? And so here Arya hides, and we get a sort of mantra of Arya, still as stone. I say this is a sort of mantra in that she doesn't list it with her original set of Syrio's lessons, but it does appear later in the same chapter when hiding from Varys and Illyrio, and Arya couples it with quiet as a shadow. Still as stone is also not like her original set in that other characters also think about it and use this simile, unlike say quiet as a shadow or fierce as a wolverine, which are Arya's alone. Our author may just like this simile. You think it might be him? The pretty one was saying. What? Did the others take your wits? Why not? He's a dwarf, ain't he? The imp weren't the only dwarf in the world. Maybe not, but look here. Everyone says how clever he was, true? So maybe he figures the last place his sister would ever look for him would be in some mummer show making fun of himself. So he does just that, to tweak her nose. Ah, you're mad. Well, maybe I'll follow him after the mummery, find out for myself. The guardsman put a hand on the hilt of his sword. If I'm right, I'll be a milord, and if I'm wrong, well, bleed it. It's just some dwarf. He gave a bark of laughter. So here Raff the Sweetling wonders if Bobono is in fact the real Tyrion, which once again makes the other guard think Raff is crazy, which of course he is. Raff's twisted logic is that a mummer's show making fun of Tyrion is the last place someone would expect him, and therefore logical for Tyrion to be at. And so he decides he's going to kill Bobono just in case, hoping to collect Cersei's bounty on Tyrion's head. As we see, the stranger approaches Bobono. Now of course, Raff is an absolute idiot. First off, he's completely forgetting the fact that Tyrion famously lacks a nose, while Bobono has one. Additionally, Harry Swift knows Tyrion. They both lived in Casterly Rock, so Harry Swift would recognize Tyrion if Bobono were indeed him. But even putting that aside, such a public place would be a horrible hiding place for Tyrion, and news would get back to Cersei immediately. In fact, news of the existence of Bobono already made it back to Cersei in Cersei 8, A Feast for Crows. That said, it is a bit ironic that Tyrion is in fact posing as a mummer as he heads south and then east, though this is a function of mummery being a go-to profession for dwarfs. So we do have the other guard ask if the others took Raff's wits. Throughout our story, the others take is usually a curse, the equivalent of damn or forget or fuck. One can say the others take him, and it's like saying damn him. However, occasionally if someone is lacking something, one can ask if the others took that thing away. For example, in A Storm of Swords, Jeor Mormont asks Sam if the others took his eyes, implying that Sam is blind. Now, interestingly, Raff says that the play is making fun of Tyrion, which at first seems a bit off as The Bloody Hand appears to be a violent history, not a comedy, but we should remember that public theater in the past used to be a rowdy and ruckus affair, even for tragedies. The darkness and violence was considered fun. Today we see the same with horror movies, and of course with Ice and Fire itself. Carnage is somehow fun for the masses. On stage, Bobono was bargaining with Morrow's sinister stranger. He had a big voice for such a little man, and he made it ring off the highest rafters now. "Give me the cup," he told the stranger, "for I shall drink deep, and if it tastes of gold and lion's blood, so much the better. As I cannot be the hero, let me be the monster, and lessen them in fear, in place of love." So here we actually get a scene from the play where Tyrion bargains with the stranger, that is, selling his soul to the devil, with drinking from a cup of blood seeming to be the finalization of the contract. After this scene, the stranger possesses a boar to kill Robert, which thrusts Tyrion into power as Hand so he can destroy his family. Now, selling one's soul to the devil is a long-standing element of European folklore, perhaps made most famous by the German legend of Faust. The gist of these stories is there's usually a contractual interaction with an evil force, and one selling of a soul is usually for a short-term reward, yet one is willing to be enslaved for the long term. And it's notable that around this time in our story, we also have Stannis signing a contract of blood with the Iron Bank of Braavos, and Tyrion signing a contract of blood with the Second Sons, placing the two men in massive debt for the long term. While Stannis and Tyrion's devilish contracts are a bit more overt, we should also remember that around this time, Bran drinks weirwood paste that looks like blood in a sort of finalization of his contract with the weirwood net. And Arya herself has also made a deal for the short-term reward of vengeance. Arya has promised to be a servant of death, presumably for the rest of her life. And the finalization of this contract at the ceremony also involves her drinking before being given a new face. Now, Bobono speaks a rather Machiavellian line, "As I cannot be the hero, let me be the monster and lessen them in fear in place of love." This line seems to have elements of Tyrion's final lines that he speaks at his trial. "I wish I had enough poison for you all. You make me sorry I'm not the monster you would have me be." Though before and after the trial, people would commonly call Tyrion a monster, and he himself referred to himself as a monster ironically. Mercy mouthed the last lines along with him. They were better lines than hers, and apt besides. "He'll want me or he won't," she thought, "so let the play begin." She said a silent prayer to the god of many faces, slipped out of her alcove, and flounced upon the guardsmen. "Mercy, mercy, mercy." And so here Arya mouths Bobono's lines and thinks them apt. She cannot be the hero, and thus will be a monster instead. The term monster does have a history in the Arya story. In A Game of Thrones, Arya describes the dragon skulls as monsters, which at first frighten her, but later they do not. And she begins calling cruel men in the Riverlands, like the Brave Companions or the Hound, monsters. But now, like those skulls, these men don't scare her anymore, and now she's one of those monsters. It's also notable that Arya says that a play is about to begin. Although she was acting and pretending to be Mercy before, a new show is afoot. And it's at this point that Arya begins her effort to lure off Raff the Sweetling and kill him in the same fashion as he killed Lamy Greenhands, speaking the same lines. And so she needs to play the right role and say the right dialogue to lead Raff the Sweetling to that point. Arya also says a prayer to the many-faced god. The prayers of the Faceless Men are actually all in High Valyrian, which Arya does know somewhat at this point in our story. However, in her early days at the House of Black and White, she did not know the language, and so she would pray her death list to the many-faced god instead. Sir Gregor, Dunsen, Raff the Sweetling, Sir Ilyn, Sir Meryn, Queen Cersei. Here, considering the situation, it seems very likely that Arya's prayer is in fact her death list, and not some incantation in High Valyrian. We also get another notable refrain of "Mercy, mercy, mercy." Yes, Mercy is Arya's name and the character she's slipping into, but the term is heavily associated with murder in our story, and is thought about right after her death list prayer to the god of death. And this is a good place to stop. We'll continue on in Mercy Part 9. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.